What would you do if you saw a school bus in flames and heard children screaming inside? Most would freeze. But at 85, Margaret Simmons didn't think. She ran straight into the fire. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in the small town of Willow Creek, a place where time moved slow and everyone knew your name. Margaret Simmons, retired for over 2 decades, was sipping her chamomile tea by the window. Her little gray cottage sat on a bend along Maple Hill Road, the only route the school bus took every morning. She had watched that same yellow bus roll by for years, waving at the kids through lace curtains. That morning, though, something shattered the routine. A loud screech, followed by an earth-shaking crash, tore through the calm like a thunderclap. Margaret stood up, heart pounding. Through the trees, she saw it, flames licking the sky. The school bus had slammed into a tree and was already smoking. She didn't grab her coat. She didn't call anyone. She just ran. By the time she reached the bus, smoke was thick in the air, and small hands were slamming against the windows. The doors were jammed. The driver was unconscious, slumped over the steering wheel. Panic pulsed through the metal shell like a heartbeat. Neighbors stood frozen. Some were screaming. But no one moved. Except Margaret. She remembered training drills from decades ago when she was a young trauma nurse during the Korean War. Her feet didn't stumble. Her hands didn't shake. She climbed the back emergency door with surprising strength. The heat singed her arms, but she didn't flinch. Inside the bus, chaos. Children sobbing, coughing, clinging to seats. Margaret began moving them one by one, dragging, lifting, shielding them from sparks. She couldn't see clearly. Her eyes burned. But she kept going. 8 kids out. Then 10. Then 11. Her sweater caught fire at one point. Someone screamed to get her out. But there was one more. A little boy, no older than 6, frozen in fear near the front seat. Flames were inches from him now. Margaret charged forward. And then, boom. A sudden explosion rocked the bus, sending a fireball into the sky. People gasped. Someone fell to their knees. And just when everyone thought the worst had happened, out of the smoke, Margaret emerged. Her hair singed, face blackened with soot. But in her arms, the boy, safe. She collapsed on the grass, barely conscious, whispering, "He's all right, he's all right." The town of Willow Creek would never forget that day. But what came next? No one could have imagined. News spread like wildfire. An 85-year-old woman rescuing 12 children from a burning school bus? It didn't take long before local headlines turned into national ones. Reporters swarmed Willow Creek like bees to honey. Everyone wanted to meet the mysterious elderly woman who had defied fire and age in a single act of bravery. But Margaret Simmons didn't want attention. She wasn't even at her house when the cameras came knocking. She was still at the hospital, recovering from smoke inhalation, wrapped in bandages, resting in silence. Yet behind that quiet hospital room door was a woman with a story few truly knew. You see, Margaret hadn't always lived in Willow Creek. Long ago, she was one of the first black trauma nurses assigned to a field hospital during the Korean War. She saw unspeakable things, soldiers broken beyond repair, chaos in blood-soaked tents, and long nights with no sleep. But what stuck with her most was the children, orphans from the villages, scared and hungry. She had tended to them like they were her own. After the war, she never married. No kids of her own. Just a suitcase full of medals she never displayed, and a heart full of memories she never shared. Until now. When a reporter finally got her on camera, they asked her why she did it. She smiled weakly and said, "Because somebody had to. And I was there." But behind her simple answer was a deeper truth. As the days passed, messages poured in, letters from parents, phone calls from mayors, offers for awards and interviews. Even the president sent her a handwritten note. But nothing moved her quite like what came on the 5th day. One of the rescued children, a shy girl named Lucy, brought Margaret a crayon drawing. It was of a superhero, an old woman with gray hair, holding a group of kids in her arms while flames burned around them. At the top, in crooked handwriting, it said, "You are my fire angel." Margaret cried for the first time in years. But just when everyone thought her story was ending, when the town was ready to crown her a hero and put up a plaque in her honor, something happened that no one expected. During a quiet evening, while hospital staff assumed she was asleep, Margaret disappeared. Gone. Her bed was empty. Her things left behind. And in her place, a note. A single, handwritten note left under her pillow. What it said would leave the entire town speechless. The nurse on duty found the note just before sunrise. Tucked neatly beneath the pillow, it was written in careful, looping script. "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it because that's what love does. If you want to thank me, plant something that grows. Something that gives. That's the kind of memory worth keeping." Margaret Simmons. There was no trace of where she went. No security footage, no taxi record. Just silence. The town of Willow Creek went into a quiet panic. People searched, questioned, wondered. Where could an 85-year-old woman with smoke-damaged lungs and burned arms possibly go? The hospital cleared her room but kept the note. Some believed she went to a nearby monastery. Others thought she went off to die alone, as quietly as she had lived. But the truth wouldn't come out until exactly 1 year later. It was spring in Willow Creek, and the town had honored Margaret's wish. In the center of Maple Hill Park, right beside the crash site, they built a small garden. Not a statue. Not a monument. A garden. Children planted sunflowers. Mothers watered rose bushes. Fathers built benches. A wooden sign at the entrance read, "The Garden of the Fire Angel." Then, on the anniversary of the bus crash, something unbelievable happened. As the town gathered for a remembrance picnic, an old woman walked through the garden gate. Her steps were slow, but her posture straight. Her skin was weathered, her hair now pure white, braided neatly behind her. It was Margaret Simmons. Gasps turned to tears. Children ran to her. Parents hugged her. No one asked where she'd been. No one needed to. She had come back just as quietly as she had left. Later that day, when asked why she vanished, she simply said, "I needed to go somewhere green, somewhere silent, to heal, to breathe. But I promised myself, if the garden bloomed, I'd come back." And it had. The garden was thriving. Birds chirped. Bees danced over blossoms. Children played under the shade of the very trees that once witnessed fire. Margaret spent the rest of her days tending to that garden, telling stories to children, teaching them how to care for things that can't speak. Flowers, trees, each other. When she passed peacefully 5 years later, the town didn't grieve the way people usually do. Instead, they planted 12 new trees, one for each child she saved. And every spring since, the children of Willow Creek gather in the garden with watering cans and little spades, telling newcomers the legend of the Fire Angel. It was never about medals or news stories. It was about one woman, one moment of courage, and a garden that still grows. Margaret's story reminds us that age doesn't define strength, and heroism often comes from the quietest places. If this touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to believe in goodness again. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming, teachable stories that warm the heart and stir the soul.